Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Devil's Advocate here on Weekly Armchair Sports Talk. You're lucky tonight. You've got two co-hosts here. You've got me and Keane, and we're both joined by the fantastic Jonathan Shrager. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight, Jonathan. How are you?
Oh, no, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I was saying to you before Keane popped off to do something. It's quite rare nowadays that I do any sort of talking about United, apart from obviously with my downtrodden friends and family. But ironically or coincidentally, I ended up doing one yesterday with a pal of mine who's just started his podcast. And obviously yourselves, because I know Keane is pally with Dale, who obviously I started doing stuff with Stretty News ages ago. So, yeah, it just so happens you've caught me when I've probably warmed up a little bit yesterday, so you probably got me a good time.
Excellent. Well, but yeah, we're buzzing that we can be one of the rare appearances that you do make on camera these days. So to kick things off then, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about sort of your journey, sort of covering United, and how you ended up in a position where you talking to Gary Neville is your cover photo on Twitter?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I almost feel fraudulent's a strong word, but I almost feel reluctant to label myself a journalist per se. Because I know, like yourself, you sort of mentioned to me there, you've done a journalism course, and you'll be sort of going on the more traditional route of becoming a journalist, whatever that, in that many various guises that has today in this modern world. But I did languages at uni, and then I did a marketing master's after my languages degree. So I don't have any traditional sort of teaching in journalism. I essentially just, as a bit of a sideline to what my day job was, I was, I suppose you could say, delving into the modern world of sports reporting or even just sports media, where I was talking to people, friends, about United. And that was kind of the inception of Stretty News TV back in probably the last Fergie year, first Moyes year was probably when we started about 10 years ago. And on the back of that, my other passions sports-wise were boxing and MMA. So I started to get a few gigs covering events for various websites, creating YouTube channels for them, travelled to Vegas a lot to build a YouTube channel over there with a big platform in America. And United stuff kind of just organically started to get a few more gigs. So I did a few bits with MUTV, produced a couple of documentaries with them. It was a series called Sporting Reds, where basically Anthony Crolla, for example, a well-known Manchester United fan from a different sport, where we'd go around kind of documenting their support of United. So did a couple of those when I met the MUTV lads. And then just sort of through contacts and, what it's like, networking, and managed to get some good interviews. And I'm sure we're going to delve into sort of a little bit about, how to get into these things. But I never always, I touched on it off air. It's very difficult nowadays in the modern game to get access to big names. So I always thought that was a little bit sort of a futile exercise trying to get those kind of names. So I would always go for ex-players and sort of characters around the club, peripheral characters that still had really interesting stories to tell about Manchester United. So, ultimately then you build a little bit of a profile, and then you get the occasional big name like Gary Neville, for example, like you mentioned. But yeah, it's, as I said to Keane when he initially made contact, my kind of route into media was very circuitous and not traditional in any sense of the word. So I suppose via a textbook, you'd say do the opposite of what I did. But I suppose in this modern world with the internet, the beauty is you can carve your own path a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think there is anything these days as a traditional journalist or anything like that. In the days of Twitter and instant news, everyone, as long as they've got the desire and the passion to do it, can do it. And everything you've just said there to me sounds like journalism. So, like you say, you might have done languages and stuff at uni, but you sound like a journalist to me, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, but yeah, and as well, like without sounding, what's the word? Not cocky's not the word, but I would sort of back myself, even if someone gave me a traditional journalist job, like if I could sort of fully focus on that, I think I'd do a pretty good one, because essentially, like you say, journalism is just, reporting, but it's also a lot of people skills, networking, managing to get contacts in the game, things like that. So it's kind of strange, even though I don't traditionally, write articles and stuff, and maybe mainstream journalists would look at me and not perceive me to be a journalist. I would back myself to do that job if a role presented itself. But yeah, it's just this. It's like you say. It's the modern world now, and opportunities abound, and you can kind of do whatever you want, really, within reason.
Yeah, absolutely. So just I want to touch on it. So you and Gary sat there chatting. What were you talking about? Can you remember much?
Yeah, yeah. Gary's one of the ex-players. Well, I mean, yourself. He's a very loquacious man. He's not shy. He's never going to give you one-word answers. Gary, is he? And to an extent, he's opinionated. Though I do feel he's one of those ex-players, alumni, who's quite guarded. I think he still has that guarded nature about the club, which is probably inherent to when he was playing under Fergie and everything was more of a closed shop, wasn't it? So like you saw with Solskjaer when he was there, he was probably one of the pundits more reluctant to vocalise any anti-Solskjaer sentiment as such. And that, as well as him being his friend, and he's got this kind of moral thing where he doesn't like to call for a manager's head. But yeah, he's fun. He's a fun character. He is what you see on the TV. Really nice off camera as well. Really nice guy. And I got that opportunity. Like I say before, you've kind of got to open doors, and sometimes you might have to go through 3 or 4 people to get to someone. But that was via an old friend of mine's relative who knew Gary from some work they'd done together. And it's just about putting as many feelers out as you can, really, because a lot of people do reach out to me on Twitter, and I always get back to them and try and offer what advice I can. And I always say, be persistent, obviously polite, but be persistent and just go for every random route you can, because trust me, if I told you some of the routes I've got to people, you'd laugh your head off. Like, I've got to people through their barbers, I've got to people, you know what I mean, in languages that I don't speak, by using Google Translate, and you'd be astounded the way you can get to people, and also the way, that football. There's a lot of people with egos, I suppose, like any industry, but there's also a lot of people that will want to help, that will help you if you approach it in the right way. If you're polite, you come across well, you're very, you're grateful with things, people will go out of the way to help you. There's plenty that won't, and you're going to get knockbacks. You're going to get people that don't reply to you. And you guys probably know yourself. You reach out to 100 people, 5 might get back to you, but it only takes 1 to lead to something big. So, I always say to people, just numbers game. Approach as many people as you can. Don't ever think any way is too random. Just try it, because what's the worst that can happen? They don't get back to you. The one that will is what will be your opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've stolen my next question right out of my mouth. I was going to ask for any advice for anyone aspiring, and you've answered it brilliantly there. And I think personally, I would take the advice. But yeah, like you say, I suppose obviously in this day and age, everyone's sort of contactable in one way, shape, or form. So it is just about keeping that polite persistence up and trying to break through the barriers.
100%. And if you can't get to someone via what would be, if they've got a website and they have a few different methods of contact, then look on their, use a bit of ingenuity. Go onto their social media, see who their connections are. If you can basically just sort of improvise, you're not always going to get to someone via the obvious route, and that's why I always say to people, don't just give up if the info at cristianoronaldo.com doesn't get back to you, because he probably gets about 1 million emails a day, so you've got to go via a bit more of a convoluted route, but you'll get there. Where there's a will there's a way, sort of thing.
As I do say, improvisation is key.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, it's yeah.
Well, yeah, no, cheers. Cheers. It's great to hear about your rise and how you got into doing what you do. And again, we are really grateful for you to sit here and talk to us tonight about United.
My pleasure. I'm a fan. That's why when people say journalist or in the know is the worst when it comes to being labelled that, because I just over time have built really good contacts. I've always tried to do things with integrity. I've never gone behind anyone's back or reported something without full authorization. Another thing I always stress to anyone who messages me about journalism or whatever, reporting on United, because it's become a bit of a popular thing, hasn't it? Like kind of spearheaded by Fabrizio Romano, who's like viewed as the kind of messiah in this space. But Fabrizio's brilliant, but I always say to people, there's no like quick, you ain't going to just message Pep Guardiola and he's going to tell you that he's going to sign Erling Haaland tomorrow and you're going to have 5 followers on Twitter. There's no quick way of doing this. Even Fabrizio built himself up over probably a decade of doing stuff. It's a time consuming thing, but if people really want to get into it and they're not just doing it for online notoriety in the short term, there are ways to do it. As long as you build yourself slowly and with integrity, you'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. Would you say you get a lot of people then reaching out to you, asking you for info about the club, asking you for, is this person signing, is that person signing?
Yeah, and this is the funny thing. Like, I'm really open about how little I know relatively about Manchester United. Like, the funny thing is, I get stick. I suppose anyone who does anything on Twitter gets criticism, don't they? Don't matter what you do or what you post. But I'll get stick from people saying, fraud, bald fraud, sometimes. But yeah, I don't know anything and I'm making it up. Like, what I think I'm one of the people who, because I don't post actually that much, because I only ever post if I get something that is from a really strong source, and I only ever speak to people that are really close to situations. And I don't post often. Like, I won't just jump in on a topic just to have a voice on it. Like, so Frenkie de Jong, if I haven't found out anything about that for a month, I'm not just going to post a little update, change one word from a tweet I did 2 weeks ago, just so that I can get some retweets. I'm not bothered about that. Like, it, for me, I try to do it with the most integrity I can and be as honest as I can. And like I always say to people, I never profess to know everything about United. I know a tiny percentage of it through people I talk to, most of whom aren't directly connected with the club. But, like, there might be 50 situations going on behind the scenes, and I might only be abreast of 10 of them. And I might only get a small percentage of each of those, you know what I mean? And half the stuff I find out, I can't post, because that would jeopardize a relationship I have with different people. So it's funny, like, I do find out a bit, but very much a small percentage, and I'm really open about that. I don't proclaim to know everything about United. It's nearly impossible to know everything.
Yeah, of course. I suppose with a club the size of United, there's no one that's ever going to know absolutely everything, and I suppose that's probably one of the reasons why people do gravitate towards you on Twitter and outlets like that, because professing not to know everything and maintaining that sort of integrity is key in a game where people are looking for quick clicks and retweets and things like that. We've seen that we've been linked with about 110 people over the summer, and we were never going to sign 110 players, but people are so desperate to get that news about United out that they do ruin their integrity. So it's nice to hear that openness and honesty as well.
Yeah, and also with the player thing, sort of, I alluded to it a little bit last night when we were talking. It's a podcast that's a United and a City fan last night, so he was joking a little bit about how many players we get linked with. And sorry about this, I'm just letting the dog out because he'll start barking a lot. Makes it authentic, doesn't it, when you do? Yeah. I'll get up and make myself a brew in a minute. But yeah, no, United, as you guys know, it clicks, isn't it? It's just, I mean, I can't remember which journalist basically said it on, I think it was Sunday Supplement about 10 years ago. He basically said the statistics show that anytime you mention Manchester, you're guaranteed more or less 10 times more traffic to your website. So just business logistics would suggest that every time they're going to mention us, purely to generate ad revenue. So that's what websites do. It's about as obvious a ploy as you could ever get. And, you know, the websites know it, the agents know that that's what's going to get them the most exposure. So, of course, we're going to be linked with 100 players in every transfer window. What I can tell you about from over the years, what I've kind of worked out is that we do monitor loads of players. There was that kind of, it was a bit of a joke that went around, wasn't it, with the right backs? That we'd looked at about 200 right backs before deciding on Wan-Bissaka. And I mean, I don't know if that might be exaggerated. I don't know. But for sure, we look at dozens of players, probably in each position. A club like United have got probably a scouting department that looks at dozens of players in every position. So all these players you hear about, we probably have, in some degree, looked at them. But like, there's all these buzzwords now, isn't there? Within, you're interested, you're monitoring, you've inquired, you know what I mean? There's all different levels of interest. But a lot of these reports, there usually is something in them. But it could be that we've inquired 6 months ago and not spoke to the agent for 6 months. So, like, would you ever get excited in that situation? You wouldn't, because you'd think, well, maybe we monitored him for a week and we spoke to the agent and decided, okay, we won't pursue that. So a lot of these things are just, you find out little snippets, but a lot of them are kind of, you know, they might be 6 months ago, which in football is a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the transfer circus has kicked up again this summer. Now, we'll come back onto them and we'll ask your opinions rather than any concrete news that you don't want to tell us. But for now, we'll talk a little bit more about the club. So obviously, we're just coming out of pre-season now, finishing on our tour of Australia. Things are looking a little bit more positive than they have been for the last sort of 12 to 18 months. But what do you think? How do you think pre-season's gone for us?
Yeah, I'm happy to ask you lads, because I'm, again, in the spirit of full disclosure, I've been happy to have a break from football. Like, semi-excited by Ten Hag, of course, because I think he's the real deal. But I kind of, you know, I've been monitoring it a little bit, but not watching the games in full, for example. Have you lads watched it? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts more. You probably offer a lot more insight than me.
Like, look, from watching the last kind of 3 or 4 games, it seems like he's getting his idea across, but again, it's going to take time. And I think the Villa game was a big example of that. Like, the fact the first half, like, you can see him playing in a high intensity. Second half, it dropped off. It's going to take some time for these players, I think, to adjust to Erik Ten Hag's style. But you can see the ideas. He wants high energy, high press. He wants us to do mind the ball in the correct way. That everything we're doing is with purpose. Like, I can see that from what we're doing, but I think it's going to take some time before we actually see a full Erik Ten Hag Manchester United team, before we see that proper blueprint. And I like his ideas originally. I like the players he's looking at and the type of player, the profile of player he wants. And yeah, so far so good at the moment.
Do you think when you say that we dropped off a bit in the second half, is that just a fitness thing? Because if he's getting them to do the high intensity first half, are we just basically not fit enough because they're not used to playing for 90 minutes like that, are they?
I think maybe it was a bit of both, probably fitness, but if you look at the way the conditions of the pitch that day as well, wasn't ideal situation as well. Playing on a pitch like that can be quite draining on the legs. You know, it can, like, the rain that can, you know, have an effect on it. But I think, like, when you look at, like, the type of game it was, the amount of substitutions and stuff like that, like, it disrupts, you know, the flow of the game. So, like, again, as I said, it'll take some time for, like, do this style and this idea of, like, high intensity, high press, you know, take control of games. It's going to take a while for it to adapt, because if we say truth be told, the last 2.5 years we were playing a counter-attacking system under Solskjaer, which by many degrees, like, it did well when it paid off. It did pay off quite well, and we got a lot of big wins in that system. But most of these players are used to that system. It's going to take some time. And look, as well as that, he has to bring in some of his own guys as well who are acclimatized to that as well. So, like, it's all good so far anyway.
What about specifically? I know it's probably a Twitter thing, and it was only a 45-second clip, but specifically Donny van de Beek. someone put out something saying, "Oh, he's meant to be really good at pressing or something," and he basically was kind of just jogging around. I don't know if they've just put that out to serve an agenda. Well, that kind of, and I don't read too much into like the pre-season stuff, just getting his fitness. But are you worried about him at all? How did he look? Because obviously we're all kind of curious about him. He's a bit of an enigma, isn't he, in a way?
I think. Do you want to take this one, Jamie, or I take this one?
No, go on. You can jump in. Yeah.
I think with Donny van Beek, it's almost like he's this hipster footballer that he's just like everyone's seen his clips from Ajax and think he's this. I think there's a savior complex with Donny van de Beek with some people on Twitter. They think he's just going to save everything. But to be fair, I think with him as well, I don't know if he can play in a physical Premier League, to be quite honest. I think when you look at I've said this already, I was speaking to Phil Marsh, former United player, the other day. And like we were chatting about Donny van de Beek, and I think like where he's very good technically on the ball, I think maybe off the ball he's a bit too timid. And I think that's probably why Ole Gunnar Solskjaer didn't fancy him. And I think maybe Erik Ten Hag would probably see in the Premier League, maybe not so much Europa League. I think he'd actually be a good player in the less physical Europa League where the pace of the game is a bit slower than what it would be in the Premier League. But in the Premier League, I think Donny van de Beek will struggle in the big games, especially in the games where we don't have 60-70% of the ball, where we are up against like a Manchester City, a Liverpool, well, Tottenham, teams like that who may have a bit more of the ball against us. So I think in the games that we don't have much of the ball, Donny van de Beek off the ball may be a liability in that respect. And I think, that he can press, but again, physically his stature, like I don't think he can be that player that can play in the middle of the park for Man United, especially in a two. Like in terms of like like a midfield two, and let's say like Bruno in front of him. Not unless you have someone like an N'Golo Kante there who's going to cover the ground, like some of that ilk. Obviously, aren't getting N'Golo Kante anytime soon, but someone that ilk who can cover the ground. I think Donny van de Beek would struggle.
I think.
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, go on after you, Jonathan.
No. I don't know. Did I misread a quote as well the other day? I think Erik Ten Hag said something about something that slightly concerned me, but I might have misinterpreted it. He said something about he can do basically he can achieve what he wants if he wants it. I can't remember. I'm probably paraphrasing and I probably misquoted it. But to me, the quote was more about his application. And I'm thinking to myself, if he's not going to apply himself under Ten Hag, who supposedly is the one person he will listen to, then we're never going to get a tune out of this fella. I don't know if it was just the fitness thing he was sort of alluding to. Maybe he hasn't got himself fit enough pre-season. But I really hope he does make the most of this opportunity, because I definitely see a player there. Like, he's probably one of our better players. I know you can argue about him off the ball, but he's a lovely footballer. And I do think there's something there, and I'm hoping under Ten Hag we'll see it.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you both there. And I think that this probably is last chance saloon for Donny, because I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that his most recent football experience has come playing a relegation threatened Everton. He didn't really get the minutes that he probably wanted when he went on loan. It seems, when he made the choice, because Palace were interested in him as well, weren't they, at the time? And he rejected Palace's advances, which probably seems like a bit of a daft move in hindsight, considering the brand of football that they were playing towards the end of the season. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe the regime is a little bit too sort of high-paced for him through pre-season. He needs a bit of time to get in there. But you've got to agree that if we can't get a tune out of him under his former manager, where we saw him play his best football at Ajax, then there probably is not really a chance for him in the Premier League. And it's okay to admit that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think for far too long, United have made a punt on a signing and just refused to admit that it's gone wrong, and it costs us in the long run, because we lose a return on the investment, the player stagnates, and it's never good for all parties concerned. Whereas you look at some of the other big clubs around the world, they'll bring a player in, and if it doesn't work immediately, they loan him out. Real Madrid are ruthless with it. They signed Luka Jovic, didn't they, a few seasons ago? Big money, sent him straight back on loan 12 months later because it wasn't fitting in. City are notorious for it. Nolito is always the one that springs to mind there. Pep really wanted him. He came in and he was gone within 12 months. Because there's no...
the best example with him was the goalkeeper situation when he arrived. Because obviously Joe Hart, he basically didn't fancy Joe Hart. brought in, was it Bravo? And
Yeah.
Bravo just had that. He had a bit of a nightmare of that first season, didn't he? And then I think he went and bought Edison the second season. So, yeah, you're right. We have held on to players for far too long, really, in recent times.
Yeah, and again, there's no wonder why Danny James is the only one we've made a profit on post Fergie, which is interesting considering the outgoings we've had. Sorry, Keane, you look like you were going to say something there.
Yeah, like it's mad, like you say, they've been held on to players too long. I think partially that's down to some of the wages packets that these players do have. Some players who have underperformed. It's very like number one, some of these players got contracts a bit still when they didn't deserve them. Number two, then you kind of have to consider the length of the contract, but also the wage that they're on. So, like, let's say, for example, if like player A signs a deal worth 160,000 a week, let's say, but this player, like, let's say, hasn't played well or has been injured for a period of time, then like how does a club justify buying that player? And then how can the player's agent justify the asking wage? Like I think that's where United have kind of went wrong the last decade in terms of like the way business has been done.
Well, that's why we end up subsidising the flipping wages, don't we? And it depends how hungry the players are to want to go out and prove themselves. And invariably in the recent decade, they haven't been, have they? I mean, Martial went to Sevilla. I think he took half a wage cut or something. Was he on? I would imagine we were subsidising that pretty heavily. And then he ended up not doing much there, which is bizarre that he took the pay cut and then didn't really seemingly make the most of that opportunity. Maybe injuries, I don't know. But yeah, we've been poorly run, haven't we? I mean, we all know that from the little bits we know that decisions have been lacking, shall we say. And hopefully, with Ten Hag, it's more of a no-nonsense approach. We're going to start to reverse that situation. It takes time, but I do think we'll get there.
Yeah, I've got to agree as well. And fingers crossed if pre-season, and I always try, like you said before, always try not to read too much into pre-season because it's very rarely an identifier of what's to come. But just the little things you can take from it, the positives that you can take from it. I like his standards. Him shouting at De Gea, him shouting at who did he shout at one point? Shout at somebody else.
One of the youngsters as well.
Yeah, I want to say it might have been Charlie or someone. But and I do like that. I like that ruthless attitude. We seem to have been missing that.
Yeah, and also you like the fact that toys haven't come out of the pram as a result, because maybe in recent seasons, if a younger player or maybe shouted at you maybe hear something in the press in the ensuing days, or there'd be some sort of back chat or what have you. But clearly, they see that maybe a bit of tough love isn't a bad thing. And even with the younger players, if he can see that a player is sturdy enough to accept it and sort of absorb the information without kind of getting dismayed by it, that's positive. And we need to get that robustness back in the club. Like we all know that we've been missing that, for the past decade, that we've kind of allowed player power to override what we know we all sort of experienced with Fergie, which was the manager is all powerful. And you have to respect him. And we've kind of just moved so far away from that. So if Ten Hag can wrestle a little bit of that back, happy days.
Yeah, definitely.
I think as well. I think with Ten Hag, like from his time at Ajax, he's been like an authoritarian figure where like he commands the respect of the players and it's his way or the highway. And I think with that approach, like I loved Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Like you could tell he really loved this football club. He's a legend in this football club. And I think with him, I think he was friends with everybody at too many times, and maybe sometimes that was to his detriment. Look, sometimes you need that approach where you wrap your arm around a player and you say like, look, you be that kind of father figure-ish person to that player. But I think when you look at like certain situations when the player's down tools, maybe all he did kind of need to be ruthless, in certain situations. And like, I think that's what maybe was to his detriment. But I think Erik Ten Hag's not going to take any of that bull off any of these players. Like, do you know what I mean? And I think that's where, bringing in the likes of Steve McLaren as well, I think is a very good move for him as well. Obviously being at the club and he knows the standards, his football club as well. And quite frankly, as number two, he's a very good number two as well. So I think that'll stand him in good stead as well.
100%. And even when there was that clip that kind of circulated when he was appointed, think it was about 6 months ago on a radio show, wasn't there? When he was talking about maybe Rashford and how he's gone a bit wayward and his standards aren't what they need to be and things. And, ultimately, when he speaks to Rashford, he can completely backtrack on it and just say, oh, he's just talking for the sake of getting paid on a radio channel. Or he can be really honest and say, well, no, your standards have waned like massively and we know where you need to get back to. And I'm hoping that the players see that actually it's not criticism, it's constructive criticism. And like these players nowadays, kind of like you say, maybe there was that fear to offend them at one stage. But Ollie came in. I love Ollie, and I'm happy for the job he did. But he was kind of opportune, wasn't it? He came in and he was the perfect foil to Mourinho. In many ways, the antithesis of Mourinho in the sense that he was befriending everyone. He wasn't calling out anyone and everything. And it's what the club needed, I guess, at the time. Just a shame that he wasn't able to kick on. And like you say, some of these players, maybe they capitalised on his kindness in the end.
Yeah, his kindness was his weakness at that time, yeah.
Yeah, and like you say, you do need to have a mixture of everything. But no, this geezer's the real deal. As long as he's supported, and not just financially. I mean, because we all know that throwing money at it is not the cure, especially if it's misspent. But as long as he's supported with his big decisions, and I always say this, like City fans will laugh when you say as long as he's supported, and they'll come back and say, "Oh, you've spent $1 billion and all that." And I always say it's nothing to do with the finances. It's to do with supporting him in a big decision. For example, when it comes to a player, if he thinks a player is disruptive or not quite doing the job he's asking, but United say he sells a lot of shirts or he's big in this market, and it's about not undermining him at that stage. They can't. They have to back what he says, because they did with Fergie, and that's why Fergie was all powerful, because he had the final say. And that's what encouraged me about the Lisandro Martinez thing, because it came out, didn't it, with Pau Torres? But the scouting system really were pushing for Pau Torres, but he basically overrode that decision and had the power of veto. And he said, no, I want Martinez. That's how it has to be. He's the frigging manager. He's the one working with the player, not the scouts. So ultimately, as long as he's got the ultimate say and he's backed rather than undermined, it could take years, but I think we could get somewhere with this fella.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with everything you said there. And it's a perfect segue then, talking about certain ex-players coming in. I'll talk about another ex-player that might be coming in. Frenkie de Jong. So in your opinion, how do you see this deal going? Do you think it gets over the line, or do you think he stays at Barcelona?
Yeah, I think we'd all be shocked, wouldn't we, if it doesn't happen now. Can you imagine the ridicule we'll face? Well, the club will, the fans will get ribbed, won't they? And yeah, even though the pride part of you wants us to say, oh, bugger off, let's just move on and buy someone else. Well, that's the kind of internal pride as a fan. You get a bit protected, don't you? And you say, I wish we'd just move on now and just forget De Jong. But the positive side is that it highlights how much he must be integral to his system. Like, so when we do finally get De Jong, which I think we will, he's obviously very key to how he wants to play, isn't he? So, because I doubt he would have wasted this amount of time if he wasn't someone who is absolutely integral to how he wants to play. Surely, just logic dictates that. So, I think it's all just a cat and mouse game, isn't it? He wants to get his money. Clearly, his ideal scenario would have been to stay there and get all the money that he's actually owed. But in the event that that's not going to happen, I think he's happy to come to United. He seems like a pretty grounded lad. I don't think he's going to come in and throw his toys out the pram because he's not in Catalonia. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll come here and he'll be happy and hopefully improve us.
If he's seen the weather in Manchester last week, he should have been on the first flight over.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, you're quite right. He'll be looking for colder countries, won't he?
Yeah,
to go and play in. I'd be astounded at this stage if he doesn't come, just because we've got this far into it. But only United would involve themselves in such a. I mean, you look at all the elements of this deal. It's a bizarre one, but I do think it's his first summer, and it's going to take time to wrestle the power back when it comes to negotiations. So it's his first summer. I don't think next summer or the summer after we'd ever have to get in a deal like this again. You know, where it's drawn out. I do think we're going to start wrestling power back in negotiations. Hopefully that'll be mirrored by slight improvements on the field. And hopefully this will be the last summer where it's a bit of a saga.
Yeah. Because I was saying this the other day, every other club seems to get their business in and out done without any dramas whatsoever. Whereas with us, every summer there is a transfer saga. You know, will they, won't they sign sort of thing. And it gets quite draining in it. You know, I remember back in the day, I used to love the transfer window. You know, you'd turn on CFAX and have a look and you'd see that someone signed and there was none of the nonsense. Whereas now it seems like you wait 3-4 weeks for, you know, somebody like Ornstein to tweet something and then you go, well, maybe things are moving. What is it about United as a club that, apart from, you know, necessarily the clicks and everything that it generates, but why do we get embroiled in these sagas as opposed to other clubs?
Again, I mean, you guys know yourself, it's just indicative of how the club's been run generally, isn't it? In basically post-Fergie. You know, it's pretty obvious that the people that have been running things well, we all know they're not football people. And we say not football people and they're good at business, but I don't necessarily think they've been particularly effective business people for us. Because it's like you touched upon before, Keane, handing out contracts to players that didn't merit them and basically then sort of burdening yourself with all these different massive contracts where you can't get rid of players and stuff. Where's that make business sense? So they've not made the right football decisions nor the right business decisions, it seems. And I just think the football can become a vicious circle like anything in life. If you start getting everything wrong, you're then chasing your tail, aren't you? And I think with United, you know, like I say, I'm hoping this is one of the last summers with this Frenkie de Jong thing that we have to go through this. I'm hoping if it becomes a virtuous circle again and we start playing better, then players start seeing that there's a bit of positivity around the place. They start themselves wanting to come rather than you having to convince them and throw money at them. And the whole process should become a lot smoother. And even the fact of the leaks and things like that, I think he's going to stamp down on all of it. And that will probably help things in terms of like negotiations maybe going a bit smoother and less kind of links with every Tom, Dick and Harry in the world. And yeah, I don't know if you saw the report today as well about the player that was late twice or something like that. There was a player late and they didn't play. I mean, happy days. Brilliant. That's music to all our ears, I'm sure. I'm sort of fed up of we've basically just been taking the piss out of, haven't we, if we're being honest? Like, and it's the pride takes a hit, but it's just like you're there pulling, I haven't got any hair, you're there pulling your hair out about United, thinking we're Manchester United, not in a cocky or arrogant way, just like we're one of the biggest clubs in the world and players are just taking the piss out of us left, right and centre. And it's got to stop. And if this geezer is going to do that, and he's got all these different harsh rules, Fergie would have loved it. But nowadays, apparently, you can't be strict. But you've got to be like Pep at City and bloody Klopp at Liverpool. There's no way they'd stand for any of the nonsense. So why should a Manchester United manager? So yeah, anyway, that's my rant over. But yeah, hopefully things are trending in the right direction. That's all. And it's going to take time. Like, I'm not getting carried away. I do think, segueing onto probably what you're talking about this season, I'd be happy with fourth. Like, genuinely, I'd probably shake your hand now, because to me, if we finish fourth, that means we've finished above a couple of good teams, and we've probably played well to finish fourth. So I'd be happy with that. Maybe even challenge for a cup or something. Happy days. Like, we're patient generally as fans. I don't think, apart from maybe a few people online and maybe some of the younger lads who haven't sort of, they just get a bit carried away. I think generally our fan base is patient. I don't know if you agree, but I'd say generally people, especially when going to the ground and stuff, they're generally a pretty understanding fan base.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is I hate using the word process. I hate using it, but it is going to be that, because if you look at this for from that perspective, there's like 6-7 players gone from the football club all on like free transfers and whatever. Then he has to bring in his own players, and at the same time he has to implement his own style of play, his own idea. Then in that 1 year he has to look at some of the players who are already at the club and are they good enough to play his style. But also as well he has to, like, you know, maybe look at his coaching staff. He has to look at some of the existing staff of the club. There's different facets, Joe, to this rebuild that it takes time. Like Pep Guardiola went in, and fair enough, you mentioned quite rightly there, they brought in Bravo. They got rid of Joe Hart, who was a multiple-time Premier League winning goalkeeper. Got rid of him because it didn't suit the way he played. Brought in Bravo from Barcelona because ideally he can play out from the back, but the other ideas from like a Premier League style goalkeeper didn't suit it. Brought in Ederson. Look at him now; he's one of the best in the world, and he wasn't at the time when City bought him. But Pep's seen like his idea and what he can grow into.
Yeah,
like Erik Ten Hag. Like if you look at the type of players he's brought in Martinez, young defender, fits his idea. He knows how to work with him. Malacia played in the Eredivisie, one of the best players in the Europa Conference League. Now people will probably watch this now later on and they'd laugh at me and say Europa Conference League, but they got to the final Firewood, didn't they? And by all accounts, like I know they lost, but he got man of the match in that game. So like, you know, he's bringing in players to fit his style. Frenkie de Jong is obviously the obvious one. Eriksen as well. You know, people might not know, like, you know, might sleep on it, but like when Eriksen had that tragic incident last summer, you know, where did he come back training before he went to Brentford? It was actually at Ajax.
Yeah.
You know, Erik Ten Hag let him train him before he went to Brentford, and like that, even little things like that, you know, will help. You know, Eriksen obviously try even more for Man United, and obviously the style of play he's a brilliant footballer. And to be fair, we should have gotten 10 years ago when when he was linked to us all them years ago. Like, you know, him under Fergie, I can just imagine. But like, if you look at the type of players he's bringing in, you can see his idea. Now, obviously, that's all well and good in theory. It has to be put into practice, but again, it's going to take time. We're not going to win the league this year. You know, I think ideally top 4 and a run in the Europa League is massively achievable, I think. Now, obviously, if you look at the way Spurs are doing business, Chelsea are missing out on everyone because Barcelona seem to be swooping in. I have to get that digging because I know my friend Sean, he's a Chelsea fan and will be watching this later. Do have to get that one in for Sean. But like, you know, if you look at all the other teams, they're all doing business. Arsenal are doing decent business at the moment. You know, Liverpool have brought in a couple of players. Like, you know, if they get into top 4, I'd say, John, like they're doing fantastically well.
Definitely fourth. I'd shake your hand for fourth now. Do you know what I mean? I genuinely would. Like that's going to be progress, isn't it? Last season was disastrous, so fourth will be progress.
100%. 100%. If I look at then as well, like you look at last season, the way it ended, it can't get any worse. Hopefully, I'm not cursing myself now. Like, touch wood, yeah. But literally, like, hopefully, I'm not cursing. But like, if you look at the way it is, like some of the players who wanted out certain situations with dressing room, I think this year you'll see a massive mentality shift within the squad. Now, again, I think in some games we won't get a result, but I can tell you one thing. If we're playing the right way, the fans at Old Trafford will love it. If we're playing the right way, we're attempting to be on the front foot. You know, the body language is there. You know, we'll accept that as a fan base. And even if we didn't finish the top 4, but we were better this season, that could be signified as progress. And you know, that's what it is.
100%. Even like, say, for example, you lose the Liverpool and City games 1-0 or 2-1, rather than the embarrassments that we had to endure. But you can see within those games we were competitive and we were putting together some interplay that showed there was a bit of chemistry, and but we still ended up finishing 7th, but you know, more narrowly, and we challenged a lot more in big games. And you'd say, okay, well, there's something cooking there. Like I was on this podcast last night, and the City, he was actually a pretty reasonable blue, to be fair. He was good as well. He was quite knowledgeable and he was quite reasonable. He wasn't sticking the boot in too much. And he was playing devil's advocate, and he said, okay, what about if you finished 10th? What would happen then? And like, I think that's a pretty extreme example, because for me, if you play well, it's kind of inextricably linked, isn't it, to your league sort of standing, and it's going to reflect that. So to me, if we do finish 10th, it's probably some stuff will have had to have gone pretty wrong Like maybe he's learned halfway through the season that 4 or 5 of the first team players he thought were good enough that were already there aren't up to the standard, and he's had to draft in a load of youngsters to play, and we've lost games because they're just inexperienced. But I can't see that happening, and I do think we'll finish again like in the 7th at worst, and then hopefully pushing up to sort of 4th, 3rd even at best. But I think you're right. United fans are patient, and I think he'll be given his due. As long as we see a little bit of something promising, I think he'll be given the time to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you briefly touched on it there about maybe a couple of the first team players might not be good enough to play for us. So I just want to bring up, obviously earlier this evening you tweeted that Jose Mourinho fancies Eric Bailly over at Roma. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, no. Well, he was. I forgot that he was actually Jose's first signing, wasn't he, for United? I know he signed him at United in his first summer. I didn't realise he was the first of the 4 players, because we got Lindelof, Ibrahimovic, didn't we, and Mkhitaryan. Yeah, that was the 4 we got. That was a pretty decent window when you actually looked at it. So he loves Eric. And I actually read an article as well that he spoke to him when Mourinho left Spurs, when he got sacked from Spurs last year, like a year ago, wasn't it? Just over a year ago. So they're obviously close. Like they like each other as people, and I think he rates him as a player. So yeah, I think he does want him. Whether he'll go, all the conversations I've had around Eric Bailly suggest that he's desperate to stay and prove himself. But the problem he's got now with the signing of Lisandro Martinez, if he's being honest with himself, he's down the pecking order, isn't he? Another place. And I actually think, I don't know what you lads think, apart from being like a bit, irrational, I think he's brilliant and he's entertaining. And I know he's a bit of a liability at times, but he's been one of the players I've actually gained enjoyment from in recent years when he's been fit. And I actually think he could be a decent centre-half for us, but through injuries and other reasons, I just think it's probably not going to happen for him at United, and it would make a lot of sense for him to go to Rome. So I do see potentially that deal happening, unless he digs his heels in and says, and basically really backs himself to overtake Maguire and Varane and now Martinez. But realistically, that's going to be hard to do. Is he going to? Maguire, we're always going to have a little bit of a problem with because of his price tag. And I know it shouldn't matter, and hopefully it won't matter for Ten Hag because he didn't buy him. So hopefully that won't be held over him like it probably will have been with Ollie. But the reality is he's still an £80 million player. So it's going to be hard to put Eric Bailly ahead of him in the pecking order, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree absolutely with what you said there, that there are moments with Eric Bailly where I think he's the best centre-half on the planet. And then there are other moments with Eric Bailly where I think he's the worst centre-half on the planet, because you really do get Jekyll and Hyde.
Like, what did Shane say a few weeks ago? He makes football look so easy, but so hard at the same time.
Yeah, literally. Like, he's the only man that will pull a Cruyff turn in his own box, but then will also, edit into his own goal at the same time. Like, he just has this miraculous ability to be amazing and woeful.
Yeah, he does. You know what? He'd probably be better, now you've actually described it in that way, he'd probably be better as a sort of maybe a defensive midfielder, purely because then there's at least a chance for a mistake he makes to then be rectified by the people behind him. But he could still do those little turns and, he always manages, he does like Cruyff turns in the box, doesn't he? He'd be like within the 6-yard area. He'll do a Cruyff turn and take out 4 of their attackers and just glide past them, but then he'll trip over the ball, won't he?
Exactly.
Yeah,
but he'll injure himself in the process.
Well, I don't know if it's indicative of how bad United have been, but he's made me smile. Not many players in recent years have actually brought me any kind of joy, and I don't know if it's a good thing. That it may be because he's like a bit of a character, but I love the bloke. He's kind of got that Anderson thing about him, hasn't he? Where he's almost, you just want to keep him around the place because he seems like a great laugh. And I know that you shouldn't be playing a footballer £100 grand a week to be basically picking up morale. But I just want him there as a fan.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's like we saw again in preseason, the games in which he did play, his progressive ball carrying is really good. I mean, there's probably not many people in the league that are better at that than him. The problem is trying to keep him fit and trying to get the rash moments. The fact that there's a Twitter account called Eric Bailly Bingo or whatever. That's it. Yeah, no context Bailly, and then they do the Eric Bailly no context bingo. What minute do you think he's going to do something? And every game he plays, there is a clip that they can chop up and whack on there but he's a box office player, and Mourinho's a box office manager. So you imagine that if he does leave, and I'm with you on this one, like I'd happily keep him around, but if he does leave, you imagine him and Mourinho in Rome would be a big dynamite combination. He'll have Chris Smalling next to him. Exactly. So see United reunion for a lot of them. Oh yeah, Matic, of course. Yeah. So Mourinho's basically he's doing for Rome what Conte did for Inter, and he's just picking up.
We'll be going to Roma next week. Just throwing out that exclusive there now.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Bringing back the 2018 United team. That's what he's doing now.
You can take Lindelof as well with him if he wants. I don't mind. I'm not slagging him. I don't mind Lindelof. He's competent, but I wouldn't be upset if he left.
Yeah, he's another interesting one, isn't he? Because I quite enjoy watching him. The way he picks the ball and then the diagonal passes that he plays, are phenomenal. But then again, moments later, he'll be absolutely spun out and left for dead. And it's like again, he's another one that almost looks a bit more akin to playing in the six as opposed to being a centre half. But maybe it is just indicative of the way that we've played football over the last few years. So from one potential transfer saga to another, and then I promise we'll let you go and enjoy your evening. Cristiano Ronaldo, he's reportedly due back in Manchester tomorrow for talks with the club. But where do you see that going, and what's your opinions on whether he stays, whether he leaves, and does he fit into Ten Hag's plans for the season ahead?
I think I've seen a picture on Twitter before. I think he's actually back now. So that's good that he's in Manchester. At least we're going to get some resolution, it would appear. Because I guess we'd all want, as fans, we just want that sorted at least before the first game of the season, don't we? So that we sort of know where we stand with it. And if he is to go, we can, I don't know, try and find some sort of replacement, I guess. I don't know what you lads think about it. Me personally, I'm comfortable either way. I'm not upset either way. If he goes, great, because in a way it gives Ten Hag a clean break without any huge character that could override him in the dressing room. So he's not going to have to deal with that political element of the ego of Ronaldo and the fact that he still thinks he's 25 and can play 50 games a year, which he can't. But if he stays, Ten Hag, he's Manchester United manager, so if he's thrown in at the deep end, then he's got to handle a massive ego from the offset. At least he doesn't have to handle him and Pogba and, other players that would have been difficult over the years. At least it's just one. So as far as the actual, whether I think he's going to go, kind of like I've got a hunch that De Jong will happen. My hunch is that he will go because clearly he's come back to the club. It's sort of half unrecognisable to him from the club he left. He's probably completely shocked by the standards and how they've dropped. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the reports about him angling for an exit as early as kind of, the turn of the year were true. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know if they were, but the geezer is about himself, isn't he? Ronaldo, the reason why he's put up the stats he has in his career is because he plays for Cristiano Ronaldo, not the team. And as much as I love the geezer, and he produced some unreal moments in his first stint and even last year. He's an ego player. He plays for himself. He's not, he can pay lip service to loving United, but we all know that ultimately, if he has a chance to go and play for a Champions League club and they give him the right money, and it's a big enough club for his stature, he'll leave us tomorrow. And the only reason he'll stay is through lack of options, if we're being honest. So I do think someone's going to come in for him. And I think he'd probably...
I think with this situation, I think there's a lot of frustration, I think, amongst many fans in terms of like the Ronaldo kind of wanting to leave, because a lot of fans are very skeptical about the situation because he's angling for a move now with 2-3 weeks till the season starts, rather than back in March, April when we knew we kind of weren't going to be in the top 4. I think that's where, like, you know what, I think that a lot of the criticism he's coming under at the minute, him and his agent, because he's angling for this it's coming out in the last couple of weeks, but like back in April, he was saying he was going to stay and he can't wait to work with the new manager, even though then Champions League was impossible then, you know. So I think that's where I think the situation with Ronaldo, there's a lot of frustration, and I'm with you on this one. You know, like, it's not 2009 where he left and we were losing the best player in the world at the time. No, that's not like this. That's not me downgrade like, you know, Ronaldo anyway. He's just not Ronaldo. Father time, yeah, absolutely. And I just don't like, again, like if you look at the situation for a long term, you know, rebuild, 37-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo is not going to be the answer, you know, for an Eric Ten Hag system. So if there's any time to get rid of him is now. And whilst we still have time in the window, but as you said, I think the best thing we can get now in the next kind of week or so is resolution. Because then, look, if he is staying, look, let's get him into training, let's get him used to the system. Let Ten Hag work with him on the training pitch and say, look, this is what I want from you. This is the idea we have. You know, we need you to adapt. Maybe to adapt this facet of your game. But there's some things I've seen in Ronaldo last season, like in terms of holding up the ball and, you know, getting players involved in the game, that I didn't really see of him at Juventus. And, you know, at Juventus, he's kind of a serial goal scorer. Whereas in the second half of last season, he did bring players into play. He did work hard off the ball. And, you know, like I remember seeing our left winger, I don't know if it was Rashford or Elanga at the time. And they weren't tracking back, and Ronaldo was tracking back. 100%. Like, I think the thing where some people say Ronaldo can't press, I think that's false. Ronaldo can press, he can work hard, but I do think the intensity over, like you said, 50 games a season, could he sustain that over at 37? I don't think so. I think there's times where there'll be a Europa League game the Thursday. I don't think Ronaldo's going to play in the Europa League, probably into the knockouts, like the crucial games, or probably in the quarterfinals, you know, or the semi-final. Now, that's me looking ahead, but, like, you know, I think with Ronaldo, it needs to be resolved sooner rather than later, because I think the last thing we need, especially with a new manager and hopefully a dressing room that has a load of harmony right now, is a disruptive 37-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, because the dressing room could get very toxic very quickly, and then again, more leaks could come out again. Do you know? I think that's where we are at the moment.
100%. I think if it transpires that he stays, and again, I do think that will probably be, if we're being honest, due to a lack of options. Like, I think if he can go to a Champions League club, it's clear he will. But if he does stay, I think the fans are just going to almost not forgive him. I think they'll just move on, and I think he as a player will as well, because he's such a pro, isn't he? I think he's basically going to say to himself, well, I couldn't go and play in the Champions League, so I can stay here now and try and be a bit of a hero again. But actually, maybe with a bit more substance to it, because we've got the new manager. There's a bit more hope. So I think he'll be fine. I don't think it's one of those where, if he does stay, that it will be disruptive. But like you say, the disruptive element is the not knowing. So let's just find out within the next week. That's the key here, like you point out. Just needs to be done ASAP so they can move on either way.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's best for all parties involved in it. And hopefully that's what the talks tomorrow, whenever they happen, are going to be about, you know, finding a suitable resolution that all parties can be happy with, whether that is him staying. And again, I think that there is a job that he can do in that squad. I think he needs to understand his place in that squad. Again, you know, yes, he's Cristiano Ronaldo, but at the end of the day, Fergie said it best, there's nobody bigger than Manchester United. So if he wants to be part of the squad, or if he has no option but to be part of the squad, then it's up to Ten Hag to get a tune out of him and to find a way to fit him in.
Also make him understand. This was the thing. Again, we love Ollie, but you got to make him understand that he actually is better served for himself as an athlete and the team to not flog himself twice a week playing in 2 games where it's not necessary. Just get the best out of yourself once a week. Go and get you 2 goals a game, and happy days, everyone will be happy. As long as he can kind of temper his own ego in that way, he probably will fit in well. And it's like you say, the geezer's fit as a chip. I mean, he's probably got less than 5% body fat. There's no way he can't sprint around the pitch and keep up high intensity levels. The guy's built for that. So it's just a mentality thing, isn't it? So if he buys into it, and the one positive, I guess we can say, when the initial report came out about Ronaldo wanting to leave, at that stage, we hadn't bought Martinez. We hadn't got Eriksen confirmed. So now he's coming back and he's chatting to him, having played the 4 games in pre-season where, in general, we've looked pretty good. So he's got more of a. He can now sit down with Ronaldo and sell it more to him, can't he? Whereas if Ten Hag's talked to him a month ago, it doesn't look as promising, does it? Whereas now he can sit down and say, "Well, we've got the 3 players in,
and hopefully Frenkie on the way as well."
Frankie's on the way. You can give him a bit of insight into that. He can say, look at what we did in pre-season. There's some really positive young lads. So hopefully you can sell it to him better as well. And, you know, he's got something about him. So hopefully that Ronaldo might even buy into that as well. But I'm genuinely quite not bothered either way in a way, which is a good position to be, I guess, because you're not going to be upset either way, whatever happens.
Yeah, I think I'm the exact same. I was saying to Keane before off air that this is not the Cristiano Ronaldo that, you know, I idolised growing up watching, you know, running down the wing for United. So there are 2 different versions of Ronaldo in my head, and I think it's okay to separate their stints. If he does leave this summer, then, you know, great, all the best to him. If he stays, great, then, you know, chip in and take part. But just on that then, so looking forward to the season ahead. I know we briefly touched on, you know, what we're expecting, but give us your predictions then for next season, Jonathan. What do you see happening at Old Trafford, and how do you see us getting on in the competitions?
Again, the last 10 years has really battered me into realistic submission when it comes to giving predictions. So I've got to say, I'd be very happy with 4th. I'd still be okay with 7th if we were much more competitive in most games, and you could see certain things happening on the pitch, and he'd maybe introduce some youngsters. But if you're asking for a definitive prediction, I'd probably have to say maybe 5th or 6th, because, you know, there's some good teams. It's going to take time, and I'm one of those. I'd rather sort of expect less and be happy if we over deliver. And it'd be nice, like you said, Europa League would be lovely if we get far into that. There's no reason we can't, let's be honest. You know, you only really play tough teams maybe from the quarters onwards. So if we don't get to the quarters of that, then that's probably not a success, is it? And if we have a decent run in one of the cups, like we get to a final, have a good go at that rather, because Ollie got us to a couple of semis, didn't he? We got to the final of the Europa, but domestic cups, maybe try and win one of those, and it's got a big enough squad to do it, so there's no reason why we can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you guys think? What's your barometer of?
I think better football this year. I think top 6. But 6. But look, ideally top 4. But I think get into the Champions League by any means necessary, whether it's top 4 or win Europa League for me. Either way. I think this might be like Jose's first season where we actually might get in through the Europa League, to be honest. I think that's what way we actually, I think that our season may curtail into that. I think we like Jose's first season, we'll play well. You know, we might, because Thursday, Sunday, we probably end up having a few draws where we're battering teams, but like, you know, the team is knackered type of thing, you know, where we can't, like, you know, keep it going for 90 minutes. I do see us doing well in one of the domestic cups. But I do think the Europa Leagues are most likely going to the Champions League. So I'd probably say 6th in the Europa League this season. And hopefully, I'd love a league, like get to the final of the League or FA Cup would be unreal. Because I remember my first cup final I went to years ago was the 2017 final against Southampton. And by no means did we deserve to win that game. But the fact Zlatan scored in that last minute, like it was absolute limbs in Wembley, like it was absolutely unreal. So I'd love another Wembley day out anyway, you know, getting up at stupid o'clock from Ireland, getting a flight over, having a few drinks at Reds in the airport, and you know yourself what match days are like. So yeah, look, I'd absolutely love that next season. Look, just better football, better, like, you know, vibes around the football club, you know, and just we can be happy supporters again about how we're playing and be proud of the team. Because I think, you know, there was many stages in the last couple of years where, you know, you can kind of, not that you fall out of love, because United are your only love, like in terms of football club, but you come into disillusion with some of the style, some of the ways we were playing in games. So like I like to see us playing the front foot, not give up in games, and just generally just play like United again, you know.
100%. That's the thing. It became deflating to watch us because you can forgive the bad performances, but it was the half-arsed nature of some of them. It was the clearly you've got eyes to see that some of the players were not putting in shifts, and that was the most dispiriting part of it, wasn't it? But I just can't see that being allowed under this fella. So restore a bit of pride in the shirt, and happy days.
Yeah, I've got to agree.
You echo in those sentences. I mean, how can you not be happy with it? I mean, given what we had to endure last season, finishing sixth, winning a Europa League and getting to a cup final would be brilliant, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I do think we might do better in the league than people think. I'm not saying we're going to win it or anything like that, but I think Chelsea are going to struggle this season. I just have the feeling we've seen Tuchel making his remarks about how the Premier League starts in 2 weeks and we're not ready. A lot of their targets they haven't managed to get over the line so far, which I know sounds a bit ironic coming from us when we're still flirting with Frenkie and Barca, but I get the feeling that they might drop off a little bit. I can see us getting into fourth. Arsenal will probably do their usual thing that Arsenal do, where they hype themselves up massively and fall short of the mark. But I get the feeling that we'll have a good run in one of the cups. I hope, again, I hope we can do it in the Europa League and in one of the domestic cups as well. But I'm just looking forward to it. And I agree with both of you. A bit of pride on the shirt for the shirt, and some better football throughout the season would be fantastic. The one thing I'm going to keep my eye on is obviously with us having a World Cup in the winter, are we going to see players either up their game or start to curtail a little bit because they don't want to get injured before they fly out, which I think is going to be a bit of a problem if we've got, I can't remember the schedule that much, but I don't think we've got many sort of massive games scheduled around November time. But I don't want players in the back of their mind thinking, oh, there's a challenge I could go in for here, but if I do it, I'm going to pull my hamstring and be out for the World Cup. So actually, I'm going to ignore that runner and let them get past me. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to have to consider.
Yeah, that will be. Yeah.
But on that note, it's been over an hour here, and it's been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for joining us, Jonathan. But I'm sure you want to get yourself off and make that brew that you mentioned before. Yeah. But look, thank you very much for everything. It's been great to chat to you. I hope you do enjoy the season coming up. And I think your audio's dropped off a bit there, mate. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
I was saying, no, don't be daft. I was saying thank you for having me on, and it's been an absolute pleasure. No problem.
Brilliant. And I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon.
Just on behalf of the channel as well, really do appreciate you coming on. Look, hopefully we can have a chat later on again in the season. We get yourself and Dale on as well at the same time. We'll have a big catch up. Yeah,
definitely. I'll definitely need the camera then, because if there's no camera in you and Dale, I think you are Dale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely got that similar twang. But like I say, I very rarely do these things, but I'm a bit of a, like you've probably noticed, Keane, a bit of what's the word? Impulse isn't quite the right word, but I'm one of those people. If I fancy doing it, I'll just message you and say, do you want to do it tonight? I'm a bit like that. I'm rubbish if I pencil something in for 2 weeks because something will come up, but I'm all right if you just catch me on the day. So just message me after we've beaten City 4-0 and get me in a good mood, and I'll jump on with you that night.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a few beers or whatever as well at the same time.
Sounds good to me. No, pleasure. Absolute. Pleasure chatting. I'm going to walk the dog now.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Thanks for coming on.
No, pleasure.
Thank you very much.
No worries at all.
See you later.